Hey, everybody. How are you doing tonight? So glad to be with you. I'm here in my lovely Brooklyn apartment, sitting in front of my new bookshelf. The old one was falling apart too much, and so I rearranged the furniture, got a new one. As you probably noticed, that was a couple weeks ago before I left town, but now I'm back, and I'm sitting here in front of my lovely bookshelf, and we're going to have yet another great late night conversation. So glad to be here, everyone. Let's do this thing. Let's do this thing we do, this late night conversation thing. Thanks for being here with me, everybody. Let's go.
Spoken of the American century. I say that the century on which we are entering can be and must be the century of the common man.
A radical redistribution of economic power.
I mean, we know that racism is just a byproduct of capitalism. Everything would be all right if everything was put back in the hands of the people.
We need a government that will make sure Americans are taken care of and organize the economy to serve the people, not the profits of a wealthy few.
We now have the techniques and the resources to get rid of poverty.
We got to start getting out there with the people.
Get out of the movement and get to the masses.
We need a government of action.
Hey, how's everybody doing? So, the way we do this is I give my opening remarks. Then after that, we do a roll call where I call you all out as I see you, names and locations. Then from there, I answer your questions. And John McCarthy's already sent his question, which will be the first one answered. He sent it via Buy Me a Coffee, which is the best way to send questions. You can also do Rumble rants on the Rumble, and you can also Cash App me, Caleb Maupin 22. And as far as announcements, join the Center for Political Innovation. We are doing great, amazing things. We've got some amazing operations going on, and mark your calendar for August 15th for our national convention this summer. That's going to be a hit. And on top of that, if you're a member and you'd like to spend time with other members and be part of our summer program, our 7-day program this summer, mark your calendar for August 12th to August 19th. That's when we'll be in the Chicago area for a week of education, activism, the whole 9 yards. So as I said before, first the opening remarks, then the roll call, then I answer your questions. Buy Me a Coffee is the best way to send questions. You can also do Rumble rants. You can also Cash App me at Caleb Maupin 22, but the best way is Buy Me a Coffee. So now that we've gotten all of that out of the way, is Trump finished? I don't know. I mean, I honestly, I've got to tell you, things look very, 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 very bad for Donald Trump right now. It seems like they're hitting him from every angle right now. And he deserves it. I mean, it's not like he's being victimized, right? The Epstein files doesn't look good. ICE killing people on the streets of Minneapolis when they shouldn't, terrorizing Minneapolis, no, not good. Now, I mean, it just keeps piling up, right? So now we've got the situation where apparently there are people coming forward claiming that Trump ordered Epstein's execution or death. That's pretty intense, if ever. I mean, a lot of things are piling up right now. But I'll tell you something that is dominating the news cycle. Also, a negative story about Trump makes me think that he's going to get out of this one. And you'd be surprised, but something happened today that I think points to Trump's political brilliance. It's not a good thing he did, but it's a brilliant thing he did, right? You're talking about politics as the art of war. We're not talking about it as the art of right and wrong. Trump did something brilliant today. Absolutely brilliant. Trump did something genius today, right? If Trump thought of this himself, which I think he very well may have, it was genius. Whoever thought of it on his staff needs to be promoted. And what Donald Trump did, it was not, I'm not endorsing this by any means. It was a pretty nasty thing to do. But Trump's official Twitter account, I don't know if you saw, tweeted out an image, a video that had Barack and Michelle Obama, their faces edited onto the body of apes. Doesn't get more racist than that. That's just like, it's like one of the most blatantly racist things ever. And it was deleted after it went up. And the White House said, oh, a staffer did this without getting approval. I don't buy that. And it's brilliant because now all of the anti-Trump networks like CNN and MSNBC are all talking about that. And they're calling Donald Trump a racist. And Donald Trump's been called a racist about 1 million times. And whenever they call Donald Trump a racist, all of Trump's supporters roll their eyes. And they don't care. And Donald Trump is used to being called a racist. He's been poking that button since the moment he launched his presidential campaign, right? They're rapists, they're murderers, bad hombres, right? Every time he does that, all of his supporters hear Trump's critics calling him racist, and they immediately roll their eyes and go, oh, yeah, he's racist, and they defend him. Meanwhile, the anti-Trump people always take the bait and call him racist. And I mean, this is pretty racist. It doesn't get more racist than this. I mean, if you're tweeting out an image of the first black president and his spouse on the body of monkeys, doesn't get more racist than that, but that's not the point. The point is that Trump's base they hate political correctness. They hate being called racist. They take it personally when Donald Trump is called a racist. So Trump did something to intentionally provoke people to call him racist so that the conversation would be one that was in his favor. And if you think about it, there's no way that Donald Trump is going to lose. He's not going to lose the argument on the basis of him being a racist. If that was the case, he never would have been elected in the first place. He never would have been reelected. Trump, if the second they start calling Trump racist, he wins. And so Trump intentionally did something today because he's really vulnerable right now on this Epstein stuff. And he's vulnerable on a number of other fronts right now, which we'll get into later. And so he went out of his way to make sure he got attacked in a way that wouldn't hurt him and would benefit him. And that's brilliant, right? The Democratic Party machine, especially post Black Lives Matter, post George Floyd, cannot resist any opportunity to call Donald Trump a racist, even though it doesn't matter in the polls. It doesn't affect Trump's popularity, right? I mean, calling Trump racist has absolutely no impact on his popularity. Just doesn't matter, right? I mean, if there's one, it's like shooting Superman. Unless you've got kryptonite on the bullet, it's not going to work, right? You call Trump racist, and he holds up his hand, and the bullets bounce off. Like that is an insult that does not hurt Donald Trump in any way. So Donald Trump went out of his way to get himself called racist by doing something that was pretty, I mean, it doesn't get more racist than that. He wanted to make sure they called him racist. And so he posted, like, it was like the most blatantly racist thing he could do, right? I mean, and he posted a racist video, and then he made sure he had deniability, right? Oh, a staffer put that up. And now the conversation is all the woke people who would never vote for Donald Trump anyway, all the people who hate Trump are taking the bait, and they're all shouting, he's a racist. He's a racist. And Donald Trump is saying, oh my God, political correctness. It's on his terms, right? And it's brilliant. I mean, it's a brilliant move. I don't know if it'll save him or not, but it's that kind of brilliance that has gotten Trump into the White House on 2 occasions, on 2 separate non-consecutive terms. Like Andrew Jackson, Donald Trump has gotten elected, and he understands this, right? He understands this. And that's an oversimplification. There's something to what you're saying, Kokol Anon man, but it's not simply that you're not right. You're not exactly right. It's people who resent being called bigots, and they might actually be bigots, right? But it's not simply that, right? It's people who feel victimized by being called bigots, right? People who don't appreciate the culture, the politically correct woke culture that has developed, people who've had a relative cut them off because they voted for Trump, people who have gotten unfairly scolded in their workplace or in school, people who have developed a resentment around accusations of racism. That's mainly what it is. Now, many of those people may rightly deserve it. And that's one thing, that I will say, right? It's the whole thing. It's I think, what was it? B.F. Skinner, the famous psychologist, right? Nobody likes to be punished, right? And nobody does, right? Punishment is a very, very ineffective way of changing people's behavior, because whenever someone punishes you, you can always say, I'm being victimized, I'm being unfairly treated. And in fact, that is your natural response generally, right? I think in the book How to Win Friends and Influence People by Dale Carnegie, the famous self-help guru, he talked about how in the prisons of America, right? In like the maximum security prisons of America, the most vicious rapists and murderers and bank robbers, psychologists have gone to interview them. And many of them believe they did nothing wrong. They have done gigantic leaps and backflips in their minds to explain that somehow they're the victim. They didn't do anything wrong. That's and human beings really don't like to admit that they've done wrong things or that they have fault, right? They really don't. And especially the worse of a thing you've done, the more unlikely you are to admit it. Maybe it's easy to admit you were late for work, but if you've done something really horrendous, like murdered somebody or like been racist, it's a very, very hard thing to admit because you were, and especially, well, anyway, that's a whole nother spinoff. But back to the main point, which is that Donald Trump, he did something politically brilliant, which is he doesn't want to have the argument of Epstein files. He doesn't want to have the argument of, did he kill Jeffrey Epstein? He doesn't want to have the argument of, is he going to war with Iran? He doesn't want to have the argument of ICE went to Minneapolis, is now pulling out of Minneapolis. So Donald Trump arranged to have an argument about whether or not he's a racist. And he provoked it. And it was almost desperate how he provoked it. I mean, he didn't say bad hombres. He found a racist video, put it up on his Twitter, had it removed, so there was deniability. And now we're back to having an argument about him being a racist. Farmouth, you can say that all you want, right? But I'm telling you, in the art of political warfare, this benefited Trump. And you can be emotional about it, and you can say that that's not the case, but I'm telling you how this works, right? When the argument against Trump is Donald Trump a racist? Trump wins with the majority of the American people. Whether you like that or not, that's not right. It's certainly not right? Accusations of racism should be taken seriously. Racism is a serious issue. But I'm telling you, Donald Trump's entire political career has been based on tapping into the resentment of people who don't like being called racist. And he will always win, right? And it doesn't help that, in this instance, it doesn't get more racist than what he did today, but sometimes they are a little bit, sometimes they stretch things, right? Let's be real. Sometimes they do stretch things a little bit, right? Now, in this case, they clearly didn't, right? It's indefensible, but that's the point, right? But the anti-Trump hysteria, Trump is Hitler, Trump is, the anti-Trump hysteria, that plays into Trump. And so if he does something blatantly racist like this, the argument then becomes, is Donald Trump a racist? And he wins, okay? And That's just how American politics at this time works, right? Yeah. You know, and and you may be right. It may not save his ass. Honestly, I don't know if he's going to be able to get out of this one or not. I really don't. I really, really don't. So, we're huge fans of Kim Iverson. We love Kim Iverson. Kim Iverson is awesome, right? Kim Iverson is great. She's had so many good people on her show. Kim Iverson is certainly mad about the Epstein stuff, as I'm sure you can imagine. This is Kim Iverson's latest video. Or it's like a clip, that she made about how she's not forgetting Epstein. This is Kim.
Telling the American people the Epstein files are done. Stop talking about it.
Are you still talking about Jeffrey Epstein?
There's nothing to see here, is what they have continued to say.
I think it's really time for the country to get onto something else, really. Now that nothing came out about me.
He's sitting there saying, let's just move on. There's nothing to see here. Nothing about me. Oh, because it's all about you, isn't it? I don't think anybody denies the guy is a narcissist. But I mean, it is just really awful that there's clearly victims. There's clearly bad things that have happened. And rather than saying he's for getting justice for these Americans, for these people who've been harmed, he instead says, well, there was nothing about me in it, so let's all move on. Even though there actually was plenty about him in it, but he doesn't want to address that at all. Trump goes on and says the same thing. Just going on about, well, this was a conspiracy against me is what this was. That's what this was this whole time. Just a total narcissist.
Epstein conspired against me. Did you know that, Mr. Senator? They conspired against me, so I lose the election. So that takes care of Epstein as far as Trump is concerned. But you got a lot of Democrats out there that are very much involved with Epstein. It's really a Democrat problem. It's not a Republican, it's a Democrat problem. The only problem Republicans have is that we have to get back to, number one, running our country, and then number two, very importantly, letting the public know what a great job we're doing. We have the greatest economy in the history of the world.
So it's just a big conspiracy is what it was. So everybody just needs to move on and talk about how great the economy is.
Yeah. Kim Iverson is amazing. She's great. The Epstein files, it's like there's just so much that we've got now. So much. Shout out to Garland Nixon, by the way. Garland Nixon, made me aware of one aspect of this, which is this is a quote from the Epstein files. He emails Lord Rothschild. Jeffrey Epstein emails Lord Rothschild after the Euromaidan coup, after the USA overthrew Yanukovych in Ukraine in 2014, installed a fanatically anti-Russian government. He emails Lord Rothschild, the British, banker and, House of Lords member, prominent, wealthy British elite, emails him and says, after Maidan, many opportunities in Ukraine. That's what he says in his email. After Maidan, which is the coup to overthrow the Ukrainian government, many opportunities in Ukraine. Now, most people read that and said, okay, he's going to make money, right? Jeffrey Epstein's a big Wall Street guy. The Rothschilds, famous banking family, many opportunities to make money in Ukraine. But shout out to Garland Nixon. Garland Nixon discovered and pointed me toward this article. Now I'm going to put this article on the screen. And before I put it on the screen, I have to tell you where this article came from. This is an article from the main newspaper in Ukraine. This is not from RT, right? I know, I love RT and we bend over backwards to be accurate. We're way more accurate than mainstream media is. But there's a certain layer of people that, especially on anything related to Ukraine, they go, oh, RT, you can't believe. This isn't RT, folks. This is the Kiev Post. This is the main Ukrainian newspaper in Ukraine's capital city. This is like the Washington Post of Ukraine. This is an actual article, headline from their newspaper, March 4th, 2008. Pedophiles find Ukraine a good place to roam. Keep in mind, this is the Ukrainians saying this. This is not Russia. This is long before 2014. March 4th, 2009. Pedophiles find Ukraine a good place to roam. Nobody knows the depth of the problem, but nation is seen as a hotbed of child pornography and sexual abuse. Now, that's what the Ukrainian media admitted in a very long article full of horrifying things that I will not read on this stream. That's the Ukrainian mainstream media said this. And then 5 years later, the government of Ukraine is violently overthrown. And Jeffrey Epstein sends an email to one of his buddies in Britain and says, quote, after Maidan, many opportunities in Ukraine. What's that about? What's that about? Now, I've noticed they've tried to suddenly convince us that somehow Epstein worked for Russia, which is absurd. I mean, there's just no basis for that whatsoever. But it looks like he was definitely involved in Ukraine to some degree. Now, whether or not Epstein was involved in this in Ukraine, we don't know. But he was financially involved in Ukraine. And he did have meetings with Zelensky. That is documented. Epstein did meet with Zelensky. And that's what we know. So, take it or leave it. I don't know. But there's just so much in these Epstein files. So much. And it's sickening. And there's just a lot. Just a lot in these Epstein files. We talked about Noam Chomsky last night. There's a lot, right? And I get a little fired up sometimes, but bear with me, folks. Some days are easier than others. I've been traveling a lot, and I've just gotten home and I'm trying to get everything in order. But I mean, wild things are happening. I will say Keaton Weiss, who is the host of the Jimmy Dore Show, did a very, very good segment on the Jimmy Dore Show that was released today about Jewish supremacism. And Keaton Weiss is Jewish. And he did a great segment about Jewish supremacism and with Jimmy Dore and Kurt Metzger. It was a great segment. I listened to about half of it here before I came on as I was setting up and stuff. And I thought that was great. And he went over some of the language in the Epstein files, the way Epstein referred to non-Jews, and that kind of validates some of the stuff we've talked about on this channel before. We don't believe in any form of ethnic bigotry here. But we also don't approve of ethnic bigotry against non-Jews, right? And that it appears that Epstein's emails are full of nasty contempt and hatred for non-Jews. Keaton Weiss and Jimmy Dore and Kurt Metzger talked about it in a very frank and refreshing way that wasn't loaded with apologetics. It wasn't loaded with emotion. Certainly wasn't conspiratorial or bigoted, right? Because there's a lot of material that you'll look at and it'll start to say true things and then it'll just turn into a hate fest. And I was impressed by that segment. I really was. I appreciated the way they talked about that issue with a little bit of humor, but honesty and frankness. And they weren't preaching hate, but they weren't dancing around the topic, right? They weren't apologizing every 2 minutes. They talked about that topic very, very candidly, and I appreciated that. So that's another thing I wanted to share. The other thing that I wanted to bring to everyone's attention here, right? And John actually brought it to my attention, and I looked into it. Something's going on, folks. Something is going on, and that's why when you ask me, is Donald Trump finished? I'm not sure he's finished. I'm not sure that he's finished. Because something's happening. All right. And Tulsi Gabbard, Director of National Intelligence, according to the Epoch Times, big fan of me, which, hey, who am I to argue with the Epoch Times? Tulsi Gabbard is suddenly in the middle of a controversy. And it's not clear why. Something's going on. So the story is that the FBI raided some sites in Florida, or no, in Georgia, in investigations linked to election fraud. Okay, fine. Yeah, I mean, Donald Trump has alleged that there was election fraud against him in Georgia, the U.S. state of Georgia, with mail-in ballots. That's been something he's mentioned for a long time, that it was in Georgia there was election fraud. And Candace Taylor, who's a friend of this show, has talked about this. And actually, Cynthia McKinney, who former member of Congress, a Democrat, an African American, who I've met many times in Russia. I've interviewed her over the years about 9/11 Truth. She maintains that there's all kinds of election fraud in Georgia as a former Democratic congresswoman from Georgia. So Donald Trump sent the FBI down to Georgia to investigate election fraud. That's not the story, right? In and of itself, I'm sure that there are many liberals who find that in and of itself to be scandalous, right? Because, he's denying the election. Well, I mean, Trump has said over and over and over again, he believes the election against him was rigged. And he's said it's in Georgia. So he's the head of the executive branch. Kash Patel, the FBI director, is his good buddy. Kash Patel sent the FBI down there. They raided some sites in Georgia. But that's not the scandal. The scandal is that Tulsi Gabbard, Director of National Intelligence, that she accompanied the FBI. Now, why is that a scandal? Right? The FBI is an intelligence agency. Her job as Director of National Intelligence. The Director of National Intelligence is a job that they made after 9/11, right? After 9/11, there was a bit of a problem. Everyone realized there was a problem, that in America, we don't have one intelligence agency. We got the FBI, CIA, Army intelligence, Navy intelligence, National Security Agency. We got all. And so they made one job, and that's the job of Director of National Intelligence. And their job is to every day, they talk to the FBI, they talk to the CIA, they talk to all the agencies, and then every day they make one report and they brief the president. Here's what's happening in the world. They give the president his briefing. And so it's not every agency talking to the president. He doesn't have time to read it. There's one person who says, Mr. President, this is what's going on in the world today. That's Tulsi Gabbard's job. One of the agencies that reports to her is the FBI, because the FBI handles counterintelligence, right? That's a big section of the FBI, is the counterintelligence division. As police of the federal government, a lot of what the FBI does is intelligence related. In fact, that's how they targeted the Black freedom struggle, is they maintained that because the Soviet Union and China were supporting to some degree or other the Black liberation movement, they went after the Black Panthers as part of their COINTELPRO, their counterintelligence program. They considered it to be intelligence. And that there's a big section of what the FBI does is like track spies, make sure that people are not stealing government secrets, that kind of thing, right? That's their jurisdiction. They're federal police. They don't enforce state law. They don't enforce traffic tickets. They're enforcing federal law. They're the Federal Bureau of Investigation, a special wing of the Department of Justice that was created specifically to go after communists, right? It was J. Edgar Hoover was a Library of Congress guy, and he was going around giving speeches. And Mitchell Palmer, who was the Attorney General under Woodrow Wilson, was so impressed with J. Edgar Hoover's speeches, he gave him a bureau, right? That's how the executive branch works. You got the president, he's the executive, commander in chief, and below him you have all these departments, and then all those departments have bureaus, right? And so the Department of Justice created a Bureau of Investigation. The Federal Bureau of Investigation is a wing of the Department of Justice. You also have the Bureau of Alcohol, Firearm, and Tobacco, and you have the Bureau of, you have a lot of different bureaus, right? But within the Department of Justice, one bureau is the Federal Bureau of Investigation. So Donald Trump sent the Federal Bureau of Investigation to Georgia to investigate election fraud, and Tulsi Gabbard, who is director of national intelligence, went with them. So what? So what? That's actually quite normal, right? If there was some kind of intelligence-related investigation, if the FBI was doing that, and it was a really big deal, the FBI's boss, that's in charge of all intelligence agencies and communicates with them, might go with them. That's not a big deal. But mainstream media has jumped on this. Why did Tulsi Gabbard go to Georgia? That is not okay. They're screaming about this. And that tells me something's going on here. That tells me that there's something in Georgia that they don't want Tulsi Gabbard to see. And there's something in Georgia that they might be okay with somebody else seeing, but they don't want Tulsi Gabbard to see. And I have no idea what that is. But it's not normal, right? We know they don't like Tulsi Gabbard because she's given anti-war speeches. They don't like Tulsi Gabbard because she, has been, talking about the biolabs in Ukraine, and she's toned a lot of that down, right? I mean, she's super pro-Israel ever since October 7th, and she's toned down a lot of her anti-war rhetoric in the last couple of years, but they don't like her because of that. I went to her confirmation hearing on Capitol Hill, and they, interrogated her about various statements that she'd made, but she ultimately got through. She was appointed, but, they don't like her because she's been critical of war with Russia, critical of sending weapons to Ukraine, critical of trying to overthrow the Syrian government, went to Syria, met with Syrian President Bashar Assad. They're critical of Tulsi Gabbard, right? They don't like her for her foreign policy positions. But that doesn't explain why they don't like her going to Georgia. So what, right? If there's some kind of FBI intelligence-related investigation, she goes to Georgia. They're screaming bloody murder about it. They are screaming bloody murder. Oh my God, Tulsi Gabbard went to Georgia. They asked Trump, why did Tulsi Gabbard go to Georgia? Like it was a scandal. And he said, I don't know. And now documents have shown Trump sent her to Georgia. And now the White House has clarified, yes, Donald Trump did send Tulsi Gabbard to Georgia. What is going on here? What is going on here? I have no idea what's going on here. I'm not pretending I know, folks. I am not trying to get on here and be like, I have the inside information. I don't. I'm looking at this purely as an outsider, and I'm saying something's going on here. Why are they screaming from the heavens, bloody murder that, oh my God, Tulsi Gabbard went to Georgia? Somebody's really, really upset about this, right? You remember when Tulsi Gabbard got sworn in, there was all this stuff about, oh my God, she's a Russian asset. She's going to give all the information to the Russians. What's she going to give to the Russians in Georgia? Right? And Tulsi Gabbard's not an agent of the Russians, right? And they would definitely not give her a security clearance, and she would be in jail if she was giving government secrets to any foreign government, right? Especially with the statements she's been making publicly. She's definitely not an agent of the Russians. But even if you accept that absurd MSNBC premise, so what? What is Russia going to see in the U.S. state of Georgia? Like, the whole thing is just odd. But it gets deeper than that, which is that, and again, thanks to John who sent me this video, this is Tulsi Gabbard's response when they called her out for going to Georgia. She went on Fox News to defend herself, right? And Fox News is the Republican aligned network, and she decided to defend herself. And that's where it gets even stranger, right? When she defended herself on Fox News, she defended herself strangely. Let me see if I can find the clip for you all. I'm going to pull up the clip because her defense of her actions was even more interesting. It's almost like she dropped us a couple hints. Let me see if I can find that clip. The clip of her getting on Fox News and saying, it was okay that I went to Georgia. I didn't do anything wrong by going to Georgia. She didn't just say that. She said some other things. Oh, here's the clip. Here it is. All right, let me show you this clip. So she went on Jesse Waters' show, right? And she goes on Jesse Waters' show on Fox News. And this is her response. This is what she decided to say when she's on national TV answering MSNBC and the liberals that are angry that she went to Georgia. So this is our director of national intelligence. There's all this anger that she went to Georgia. And she's on national television, on the most watched cable channel in America. And Jesse Waters is talking to her. And this is where the interview goes. Very, very interesting.
You mentioned, Director, that there's, I guess, deep state actors who are still trying to prevent the truth from coming out. What do you mean by that?
There are still people, won't surprise you, within the intelligence community who don't want this information to see the light of day. Some of them may be implicated in the crafting of it. Others are concerned about people being embarrassed. Others are concerned about accountability and what else we will discover as we continue down this path towards the truth and bring about accountability for the American people. That's really what this is all about and why it does such a disservice. I was standing there in the White House press briefing room and hearing some of these crazy questions being asked by members of the media who are trying to distract and deflect away from the historic expose that we have brought forward that once again puts into question the American people's ability to trust the integrity of our democratic republic. And the reason why that is, and it's similar to the deep state actors who have been trying to stop us from releasing this, is that we have members of the media who were complicit in this from the very beginning, who were leaked early copies of this, or at least lines from this January 2017 Obama manufactured intelligence assessment. They printed what they were fed. People like Ellen Nakashima from the Washington Post, who, by the way, went on to win a Pulitzer Prize because for years she was so good at lying and not telling the truth to the American people that they gave her an award for it. These people are still here. Ellen Nakashima is still harassing people who work within the intelligence community who are calling up and reporting her, using burner phones to try to ask them harassing questions. There are a lot of deep state actors still here within Washington. President Trump wants us to find the truth. I want to find the truth. The American people deserve the truth, and they deserve accountability, which is why I'm really glad to see that Attorney General Pam Bondi and the Department of Justice announced the creation of a strike force team today, specifically to get after all the intelligence and evidence that we have gathered. We have more coming, and to determine the path forward to bring about that accountability.
We forward to hearing from.
So Tulsi Gabbard goes on Fox to defend her right to go to Georgia. And she says on Fox News, as you just heard, that there's more to the Russiagate hoax. Right? So Tulsi Gabbard, one of the best things that she has done since taking on the task of being director of national intelligence is release all these files showing that the Obama administration lied and claimed Russia interfered in the elections in 2016 to get Trump elected, and that it was cooked up by Hillary Clinton's campaign and by Barack Obama, and that, Barack Obama 3 times he went to the intelligence director, James Clapper, and said, is Russia meddling in the elections? And they said, no. After the election, are they meddling in the elections? No. And the 3rd time he said, that's not the answer I'm looking for, guys. And they came back with this claim that Russia had meddled in the elections, and they hadn't. And in fact, Russia had information on Hillary Clinton that would have destroyed Hillary Clinton, which they sat on. They were aware that Hillary Clinton is addicted to painkillers. They were aware that Hillary Clinton had psychotic meltdowns behind closed doors. And they were aware of other aspects of Hillary Clinton that would have destroyed her credibility, and they sat on them. So if Russia had wanted to interfere in the elections to help Trump, they very well could have, but they didn't. So that was revealed. Then it was also revealed that the claim that Russia interfered in the elections was largely based on the discredited Steele dossier, the PP tape, the claim that Putin had a videotape of prostitutes peeing on Donald Trump, that Donald Trump, is into golden showers, and that Putin has a tape of it, and that Trump is blackmailing, or that Putin is blackmailing Trump with golden shower porn. And, and that's ridiculous. And this British agent, Christopher Steele, gave them a dossier making this claim. And the FBI looked at it and said, this is bullshit. And then they said, well, we might as well run with it. We're going to include it so that we can claim that Russia is interfering in the elections. And FBI Director James Comey was then called before Congress, and they looked at the Steele dossier and they said, this is not credible. You didn't include this in your assessment that Russia interfered in the election. He said, oh, no, we didn't include it. Well, it shows they did, right? So the whole claim that Russia interfered in the elections was based on nothing. Nothing. It was based on a letter, a piece of paper, a document, a dossier. It was based on something that a guy in England wrote, a disgusting sexual innuendo piece of paper that was written by a guy in England that the FBI looked at and said, this is bullshit. And then they said, okay, we have to say Russia. All right, we'll go with it. And then they included it, right? So there's nothing there. But they fed this to mainstream media. And for 8 years straight, we were told that Russia had interfered in the elections. That's what we were told for 8 years straight. 8 years straight, we were told Russia had interfered in the U.S. elections. And it was a hoax. It was fake. It was not true. And Tulsi Gabbard released a huge trough of information showing this. But there's more? That's what Tulsi just said. There's more. And apparently her trip to Georgia that they're all angry about is related somehow to the fact that there's more. And on top of that, she started out the clip by saying there are people in the intelligence community, people in the FBI, maybe, that don't want additional information to be released. What more is there? Obama lied. Hillary Clinton's campaign enabled this lie. James Clapper went along with the lie. What more is there? But apparently, Tulsi Gabbard accompanying the FBI to Florida has got them all upset. Something's going on. Now, I'm just going to make some other observations. You all know I was just in Minneapolis. I was in Minneapolis, Minnesota. Minnesota is a state where there's a practice that is legal. It is not illegal. I am not alleging illegal activity here. It is very legal. It's called ballot harvesting. Now, every state has different laws about how to vote and about mail-in voting. And during the pandemic, a lot of states, made it a lot easier to vote through the mail. But in Minnesota, ballot harvesting is legal, and it's way more legal. And in other places, right, you can pick up someone's mail-in ballot, but you have to put it in the mail, things like that. But in Minneapolis, in Minnesota, the laws around ballot harvesting are very, very loose. And, there were things that people saw that were completely legal. They were not illegal. They were completely legal that went on in Minnesota. For example, there were whole apartment buildings, right? I actually went to what they call Little Mogadishu, this huge apartment complex. I went there, and apparently the whole building, every single person, thousands of people live in these huge apartment complexes. The whole building, every single person's ballot was loaded up in one guy's car and driven to the voting place. That's legal in Minnesota. Now, most states, if you vote by mail, you have to mail it yourself. You have to put a stamp on it, or there's a stamp already on it or whatever, and it goes in the mail. In Minnesota, one guy can go to the apartment complex and collect everyone's ballot and put it in his car and drive it to the voting station. That's not illegal. I'm not alleging anything illegal. That's legal in Minnesota. It's not legal in any other state. And apparently, the Somali community that was involved in all this fraud and all that, apparently some of these apartment buildings there'd be one guy from the Democratic Party who would drive to the building and he would collect every single person in the building's ballot in his car and drive to the voting station. Now, that's legal in Minnesota, but it's also shady as hell. Who knows what happens between the voting station and the apartment complex? And how do we know that every person who handed him the ballot filled it out themselves? There's a lot of questions, but obviously it's illegal to change anyone's vote or anything. But it's pretty shady if one guy can load up thousands of ballots or hundreds of ballots into his car, and he's an employee of one particular political party, and he can drive them to the polling station. And that's legal in Minnesota. And we know that there's some kind of vendetta that the Republican Party and Trump have against Minneapolis in particular. They don't like the Somali community. They don't like that 80,000 Somalis have moved to Minneapolis. That's what I was just there observing, right? And ICE, they've sent ICE in there to be bullies and terrorize that area, basically. And it's the biggest immigration operation in history. And they've sent them there to, terrorize that area as part of a vendetta related to the fraud, related to, Ilhan Omar opposing Israel, and related to 80,000 Somalis, and something's going on. All right. And now Georgia is another state where there's widespread allegations of election fraud via mail-in ballots. And so they've sent the FBI to that state, right? And as I said before, Candace Taylor, friend of the show, has come on here. She maintains there is total fraud in the state. I mean, that it's completely ridiculous. Cynthia McKinney, former Democrat elected from Atlanta, good friend of the show, good friend of Center for Political Innovation, great person. She also maintains there's huge fraud in Georgia elections. And Trump has been maintaining Georgia is where they rigged it against him. And so now they sent the FBI to investigate, to raid a few sites. And now the media is pissed as hell. How dare Tulsi Gabbard have accompanied the FBI? What are they afraid of, right? What is there in Georgia that it would be okay for a rank and file FBI agent to see, but not okay for Tulsi Gabbard to see? Explain that one for me. I don't understand that. What is there? What could possibly be in the state of Georgia that a regular FBI guy could see, and that would be fine, but Tulsi Gabbard sees it? Oh my God, what's going on there? What's going on there? Something's not right. And Tulsi then says on Fox News, there are people in the intelligence agencies that don't want more information about the Russiagate hoax to come out. And what more could there be? There are people in the intelligence agencies that are trying to keep information about the Russiagate hoax from coming out because it implicates them, because it's embarrassing, etc. So what's going on here? I don't know. I'm not telling you what's going on because I don't know what's going on, but I'm telling you something is going on, right? And look, folks, you can, one thing I don't like is the red team versus blue team. I think what Donald Trump is doing right now, threatening war with Iran, abominable. I have been to Iran. I think the Islamic Revolution has had great victories. I've interviewed the Iranian head of state, Ibrahim Raisi. I've been in the same room as the supreme leader. I've got a whole film on my website about Iran and anti-imperialism and the Islamic Republic and what it means. I'm not a Trump supporter in that sense. I mean, I thought maybe he might be the lesser of two evils in the last election, and now I wonder. I mean, I know how bad Kamala Harris was, but Trump has turned out to be just an utter disappointment as president. ICE is terrorizing people, and he promised to end the war in Ukraine in a week, and it's well over a year into his presidency, and he hasn't done it. And I mean, look, I'm not a blind apologist for Trump, okay? But we need to get past this red team versus blue team thing, because the 2020 election was not a fair election. I'm not necessarily signing on to the Georgia issue, right? I mean, it's interesting, the FBI, we'll see what the FBI comes up with. But I have maintained that the 2020 election was stolen by the FBI because of the Hunter Biden laptop. And there's no, you can't debunk that. Hunter Biden had a laptop from hell. Hunter Biden's laptop had images of him smoking crack. It had images of him having sex with prostitutes. It had all kinds of emails of him getting favors from people because his dad was the president. Hunter Biden's laptop was full of evidence of corruption. And it surfaced during the 2020 elections. And that should have been the news story. That should have been the October surprise. Except it wasn't, because the FBI went to all the mainstream media outlets and said, don't report on this. FBI agents showed up at TV networks and said, do not report on this. It's Russian propaganda. And then the website known as the New York Post, the conservative newspaper here in New York City, did a story on it. And you couldn't share the link on Twitter, not as a post, not as a private message, you couldn't share it on Facebook. They blocked the link. Do you remember this? So they basically said, we're not allowing any discussion of the fact that Joe Biden, his son, was involved in, all kinds of criminal behavior. And then after Joe Biden won the election, it turned out it was all true. And the New York Times admits it, and everyone admits it was true. And polls even showed that the people said if they had known about the Hunter Biden laptop before the election, they wouldn't have voted for Biden. So yes, the 2020 election was stolen. I don't have any evidence of, votes being changed. I've heard what other people have said, but it was stolen because the FBI went and suppressed a news story and silenced a true news story about Hunter Biden corruption, and silenced it because they wanted Biden to win. That is a fact. Okay? So yes, the 2020 election was stolen by the FBI. So fast forward to 2024, Trump wins in a sweep. Trump takes office. Trump puts Kash Patel, a harsh critic of the FBI, in charge of the FBI. Trump puts Tulsi Gabbard, longtime anti-war voice, director of national intelligence. After months, after Trump's been in office for months, Tulsi Gabbard finally is able to release proof that Russiagate was a hoax, wasn't real. And what do we got? Now, the other thing, though, you'll remember, Kash Patel was a huge critic of the FBI. And when Jeffrey Epstein died, Kash Patel insisted, there's no way Jeffrey Epstein killed himself. But now Kash Patel, as the FBI director, says, oh yeah, he totally killed himself. And, you look at that and you're just like, there's no way Jeffrey Epstein killed himself. All right. It's a question of who actually killed him, right? But there's no way Jeffrey Epstein killed himself. It's not possible, right? It's not possible to kill yourself the way he killed himself. And the video surveillance in his cell blipped right at the moment that he supposedly killed himself. That's ridiculous. Okay, Jeffrey Epstein did not kill himself. The question is, who killed him? I don't know. I don't know who killed him. I don't know who killed him, but I sure as hell think it's spooky that Kash Patel believes that he killed himself, because there is no way Jeffrey Epstein killed himself. It's just not possible. You just look, you really believe that the surveillance tape blipped right at the exact moment that he killed himself? And how so he was on top of his bed and he fell down and there was a blow to the head that killed? No, come on. He didn't kill himself. He didn't kill himself. And now, again, we're seeing this report of one of the prison guards says he's alive. And I mean, this is spiraling out of control. The Epstein thing is spiraling out of control. And it's out of Trump's control. The fact that they put up documents linking Trump to Epstein and then removed them. Oh boy. Something's going on here, folks. And there are people within the FBI that are working against Trump. There are people in the FBI that are working for Trump. And there's something going on related to Georgia, related to Minnesota. There's a shadow war within the deep state. And there always has been, right? I mean, that's how American politics has been for quite some time. But this shadow war is happening. And we don't really know the details of what this is about, right? But Minneapolis is not an accident. Tulsi Gabbard going to Georgia is not an accident. Mainstream media screaming about Tulsi Gabbard going to Georgia is not an accident. The Russiagate files coming out is not an accident. Kash Patel saying Jeffrey Epstein obviously didn't kill himself and then becoming FBI director and saying, oh, yeah, he totally killed himself. That's not a coincidence. There's stuff going on right now where, the old expression is the left hand doesn't know what the right hand is doing, right? That's an expression. You say if an organization appears dysfunctional, you say, well, the left hand doesn't know what the right hand is doing. But it's not simply that the left hand doesn't know what the right hand is doing. The right hand is trying to undermine the left hand. The left hand is trying to undermine the right hand, right? This is not one single body. There are different agendas and different conflicting factions within the American deep state right now that are at odds with each other. That's clear to me. That's clear to me. And I don't know who's who and what's what. And sometimes it's a little clearer to me what's going on. In this case, it's not really clear to me, right? I mean, for example, it seems like everybody involved is pro-Israel, right? Now, I mean, Ilhan Omar and the Somalis in Minneapolis are not pro-Israel. But other than that, right, the Democratic Party apparatus is pro-Israel. They wouldn't even let an Arab American speak at the Democratic convention. Kamala Harris is married to an AIPAC lobbyist. This is, there's no question that this is, they're all pro-Israel, all the people involved in this. Epstein's files have loads of Democrats in them, as well as Republicans, plenty of Republicans, plenty of Democrats. Chomsky's in there, as well as Trump, as well as Elon Musk, as well. I mean, Lord Rothschild and Zelensky, and I don't know what's going on, folks. I really don't know what's going on. But I would urge you to be very, very, very careful. Be very, very careful. Be very, very careful with anything that suddenly gets blasted in the next few weeks. That's kind of vague advice. But looking at the situation, that's what it's occurred to me that we cannot, if something gets blasted in the next few weeks, something from the Epstein files, be careful with it. Because in this atmosphere, everyone's confused. Everyone's disgusted. I mean, you can't even look at the Epstein files. I mean, it's just sickening, right? I mean, it's just sickening. You can't even start to read them. They're just so vile. And no one knows which way to go. And there's just so much there. I'm telling you, if the media suddenly decides we're going to run with this, don't run with them. Hold your horses. Hold your horses. That's my advice. Hold your horses. Don't go charging up the hill with the mainstream media right now, because a lot of things are unclear and there's so much here. And that's one of the dangers when you have how many pages is the Epstein file? So many pages. And so many people are in those Epstein files. That gives the mainstream media the opportunity to pick who to emphasize and who not to. And is mainstream media our friend? No. Mainstream media is not our friend. So if all of a sudden, out of all the confusion with Tulsi Gabbard and Minneapolis and Epstein files and did he kill him? all of a sudden next week, the mainstream media decides, aha, the Epstein files mean this. Hold your horses. I'm not saying it's not true. It might be true what they say. I don't know. But that should be your approach. I don't know. Hold your horses. Because the moment is ripe for some kind of gigantic hoax, some kind of gigantic distraction, some kind of attempt to give clarity to this whole situation. Gabby in Chicago says, let the cards play. And that is my advice to you as well. Let the cards play. Because there are many, many layers to all of this. We don't really know what's going on. You know, and the negotiations are happening too. I mean, I'll just throw it out there. Kirill Dmitriev is in Florida. And, you know, deals apparently are being made. And it looks like, I mean, I've heard this so many times. But, you know, they say positive things are happening related to ending the war in Ukraine. I mean, I don't want to sound like the little boy who cried wolf. I'm just telling you what they said. But, you know, who knows? So, and look, I hate to say this, you know, and there's probably people listening right now that are going to hear this and just roll their eyes. But, you know, it's true. What comes after Trump? Let's say this is the end of Trump. Let's say they find the smoking gun that he killed Epstein, or they, you know, and let's say they're able to somehow turn this into impeaching Trump. And then we get Vice President, then President Vance. Or what? Like, what comes next? You know, I knew for a fact that, I mean, as much as Trump has been a disappointment, I was determined to not have Tulsi Gabbard be president. I wrote a book about her 4 years before she became the nominee, and they banned it the day she became the nominee because it was so telling about who she is and her personality. And it's like, okay, Trump has done a lot of bad things, but okay, so we replaced Trump with who? With Kamala Harris? You think things are going to get better? With JD Vance, you think things are going to get better? Right? I mean, you know, and that's one thing in politics you have to think about. You know, we can agree that Trump is awful. Kidnapping Maduro, for Christ's sakes. I mean, that's horrible, right? You know, I mean, look, we're in a situation, I don't know if people saw, the nuclear weapons treaties have expired. There is no arms control between America and Russia right now. At the end of the Cold War, we signed a nuclear weapons agreement to make sure we no longer have a nuclear arms race. It's expired. It's done. Now we can have a nuclear arms race. Is that what you wanted? I mean, anyone who lived through the Cold War, now we can have another nuclear arms race now. I mean, what is going on in the world? Every time the treaties are about to expire, we get together with Russia and we sign a new one and we extend it. And now, even though we're meeting with, you know, Kirill Dmitriev is in Miami, it's expired. Yes, the New START treaty ended yesterday. What in the world is going on? What in the world is going on? Something is not right, folks. And the left hand doesn't know what the right hand is doing, but actually the right hand and the left hand are fighting with each other. And Tulsi went to Georgia and they're really mad about it. And Tulsi says there's more Russiagate stuff to reveal, and Minneapolis and ICE and Epstein. What's going on here, folks? I'm telling you, take a deep breath and don't be a dupe. Don't be a sucker. When I was out there in Minneapolis, I'll tell you, you know, when there's a division in the ruling class, you generally want to find the lesser of two evils or something like. I was out there in Minneapolis. There's no lesser of two evils. You know, I mean, ICE is awful and ICE has killed more people. I mean, so I guess you could say ICE has killed 2 people. So they're more in the wrong, I guess. But nothing good is coming out of the Tim Walz woke army, you know, triumphing over ICE, right? I mean, nothing good's going to come out of that, right? I mean, those people would like to nuke Russia, and those people would like to nuke half of America for using the wrong pronouns. You know, And, I mean, if those folks were to triumph over ICE, I'm not sure we'd be any better off, and we might be worse off. I don't know. But I obviously don't support ICE terrorizing people, shooting people who don't deserve to be killed. But I looked at that situation in Minneapolis. It's the years of Ladd. Penny gave a great interview. I think before we do the roll call and stuff, we'll show a couple videos. I think we'll show Penny's interview, and then we'll do the roll call. And then I want to show you Noah made a really, really amazing video the other day. I'm going to show that on here as well. But let's start with Penny, our member in Minneapolis. She gave a great interview to me when I was out there in Minneapolis about the situation. This is Penny giving a great assessment.
What's it like to be a Minneapolis resident amid all this?
Yeah, when it started first getting crazy, a lot of us were wondering if it was going to be another George Floyd riot. It was very scary during that time, and it's kind of getting scary now. It seems like the red team versus blue team rhetoric is really amping up, and it seems like the ruling class is trying to get a civil war because the economic crisis is really going to really get really bad, really crazy with AI and automation, and it seems like this is a distraction while we have the USS Abraham Lincoln up near Iran. We're trying to take out Iran, we're trying to take out China, we're trying to take out everybody instead of fixing our economy. And even though I'm not a full Trump supporter or a full Marjorie Taylor Greene supporter, I agree with what Marjorie Taylor Greene is saying, that they're trying to incite a civil war, and we need to focus on uniting against Wall Street and anti-imperialism.
Okay. Now, some people look at the death of Alex Preddy, and police brutality in the United States and the threats on our civil liberties and see this as like an overall crackdown on free speech and the right to protest. What do you think?
Yeah, it seems that way. We saw that during the Biden administration with the protests at Columbia University, which were led primarily by Jewish students, and they were treated very brutally, and the whole crackdown on dissent against the country of Israel.
Yeah.
It's very scary that our civil liberties are being attacked. So we should have the right to peacefully protest and also to carry arms. That's the Second Amendment.
Yeah.
So I do see the state is really ramping up against civil liberties.
Yeah. Okay. Well, any other thoughts about, just the city of Minneapolis, the political atmosphere here?
It seems like, just looking at the protesters here, they're not really saying anything significant. They're just saying strange insults to the people that are driving by that can't hear them. So I don't see them organizing to unite anybody. They're just saying strange things and then they go home. Like this general strike was not really a strike, and the people who were supposedly marching in their little strike/parade, they came to the Mall of America afterwards to shop. So I don't call that a strike.
Good. Very good point.
All righty. All right, folks. So just a reminder, if you've got a question for the second half of the program, you can send it multiple ways, but the main best way is buy me a coffee. Buy me a coffee is the best way to send questions for the second half of the show. You can also do Rumble rants on the Rumble. You can cash at me at Caleb Maupin 22. Let's do the roll call. Names and locations. Names and locations. Who is with us tonight? Names and locations. Names and locations. I will call you all out as I see you. We got Ryan in Kansas City. Kansas City, here I come. We got some crazy little women there, and I'm gonna get me one. That's a classic blues song. Jane in New Zealand. Penny in Minnesota. Just saw her on the YouTube there. Lawrence Johnson in Chicago. St. David's, Bermuda. John McCarthy in Chicago. Liverpool in the United Kingdom. JDL, Missouri. China, the seasoned noob. Kolkamanan in California. St. Joseph, Missouri. Bendigo, Australia. David Fox. Mike in London, up late with insomnia. Jenny in Cincinnati. Hiya, Ryan. Patch in Arizona. Robert in New Jersey. He's got a great YouTube channel. Go subscribe. He does great Twitter spaces as well. X spaces. Hempcar. Jacob Wu. Names and locations. Names and locations. Who is with us tonight? Names and locations. Anybody with us tonight? Insomnia Gang. Names and locations. I will call you all out as I see you. Names and locations. Who is with us? Anybody else? Names and locations. Oh, Dan in Los Angeles. He's been doing great work countering the Falun Gong. You can check that out on our website. Advocating peace with China. That's good stuff. Sydney, Australia. Emma Valentina. Very, very good. Names and locations. Anybody else? Names and locations. Charles in Saskatoon, Canada. My grandmother's hobby was clog dancing. My mother's mother, when she retired, she got very, very much interested in clog dancing, and she joined a clog dancing club. And I guess she had this wooden thing that she would dance on top of with her shoes. And it was called a step-a-tune, because the idea was it made noise as you stepped on it. So you would step a tune. So when I hear Saskatoon, I think of my grandmother dancing on this board, this thing she bought called a step-a-tune. I'm going to Google that, actually. I always just thought it sounded step-a-tune. Step-a-tune refers primarily to an annual intermediate advanced percussion dance workshop. Oh, it's a workshop in Virginia. Okay, I thought it was a thing that I don't know. Okay, I'm just, whatever. I don't know. My grandmother, that was her hobby, was folk dancing. She was very much interested in folk dancing. Step-a-tune. Gabby in Chicago is with us. We call that a dancing plank. Yeah, that was kind of what it was. But she called it a step-a-tune. And then I Googled step-a-tune, and that's apparently a workshop or an event or something like that. I don't know. I don't know. So there we go. Well, listen, folks, if you've got any questions to send in, I see David just sent in a question. And John McCarthy and David both sent questions. But if you got a question for the second half of the show, please buy me a coffee is the best way to do it. Go to buymeacoffee.com/Caleb Maupin. So, folks, Noah is a member of CPI, Noah Shank, and he has just started a YouTube channel where he's been editing videos and putting them up. He made an excellent video today about a topic I know very little about a famous influencer, Clavicular. And he took this famous influencer and just made an amazing video. Noah Shank, go subscribe to Noah's channel. And I'm going to put this video on. It's absolutely tremendous. And if more questions come in, I'll answer them. So, yeah, send me questions via Buy Me a Coffee. This is an absolutely phenomenal video that Noah made.
If you've spent any time on the Zoomer internet over the past few months, you've probably been unable to avoid Clavicular. The 19-year-old streamer and self-described looks-maxer went viral telling his audience that steroids, crystal meth, and extreme self-experimentation will help them ascend, and that it'll improve their looks, their confidence, and their lives. And that's been enough to catapult him across the entire right-wing internet, including what genuinely might be the strangest interview ever aired on the Daily Wire.
I'd say that she's pretty malformed. Her upper maxilla is extremely recessed, right? She's got the eyes of doom with no infraorbital support.
Most recently, Clavicular, or Clav, as his fans call him, appeared in a live stream alongside a lineup of manosphere-adjacent figures like Nick Fuentes, Sneeko, the Tate brothers, and Myron from the Fresh and Fit podcast. The live stream was bizarre, even by internet standards, with the group piling into a limo and singing along to Kanye's single Heil Hitler while doing Nazi salutes, after which they then proceeded to go clubbing? And as surreal as that moment was, even by internet standards, it exposed something actually important. Because Clavicular isn't just a weird internet character, he's a symptom of a broader problem. His rise reveals the underlying fantasy at the heart of a lot of manosphere, quote, self-improvement content, and how it preys on young, isolated, often neurodivergent men by promising that if they suffer enough, if they optimize enough, if they punish themselves enough, one day they'll finally get to be normal. The fantasy shows up everywhere, from explicitly political gender discourse content to apolitical fitness influencers like Connor Sinan or Toji. And there's a reason live streams of some Chad going out to a bar and getting drunk and hitting on women have become so popular. It's like one of the most popular live stream categories. It's because they're selling their audience a fantasy. And it's a harmful one. And I'm not going to lie, I'm exactly the kind of person that this fantasy is meant to appeal to. In fact, I can remember the exact moment I gave up on it. In 2024, I was invited to Sochi, Russia, for the World's Youth Festival. In many ways, it was an amazing and transformative experience, incredibly validating in many ways. During the festival, I was able to have a face-to-face with the Russian President, Vladimir Putin, in an exclusive televised Q&A. But one night, there was a lull in activities, and I remember I was walking through the festival grounds as a concert was going on. Some Russian pop stars were on stage, and people were dancing, they were laughing, they were having a great time, and I remember this sadness washed over me. Because in that moment, I realized there was nowhere I could run to. I realized there was nowhere that I could hide from who I was. Even among some of the most high-achieving people, the highest math scores, future politicians, future business leaders from around the world, high-achieving people from Russia, from the developing world, from China, from the BRICS alternative, many of whom had similar politics to me, even among them, I was not normal. Our guide even commented on it to me. I asked her one night, I said, what do you think of Americans? And she said that it felt like many of the people who were there, they just wanted a free trip. It was like a vacation to me. But all I wanted to talk about was geopolitics, obscure political movement. I wanted to talk about BRICS. And later, I told a Russian friend about this experience. And her response was essentially, so what? She said, you're bookish, you're shy, you're a little obsessive. But I like talking to you. And I thought about it, and I realized that she was right. I realized she was right that I'm exceptional. And that the only reason I've been able to do anything that I've done is because I'm different, not in spite of it. And this is the fundamental lie at the heart of individualistic self-help culture online. It's that being normal is the highest virtue that one can have, and it just isn't. Now, that's not to say that self-help in and of itself is wrong, and that self-improvement is also wrong. In fact, self-help as a genre actually has socialistic roots. Samuel Smiles, who coined the term self-help, was a member of the Chartist movement, which was one of the first socialist movements in Britain. What's more, Wallace Wattles, who popularized manifesting with his books The Science of Getting Rich and The Science of Being Great, was a socialist and a follower of Eugene Debs. It wasn't until Rhonda Burns published her book The Secret, which took Wallace Wattles' content and removed all the radical politics from it, that manifesting became cringe. What I'm trying to tell you is not that striving to be a better person is bad, but that the empty pursuit of change or improvement, abstracted from social movements, abstracted from society, will be empty, and that true change comes from joining a movement. A perfect example of positive self-help is the life of Malcolm X. Prior to becoming a member of the Nation of Islam and getting involved, Malcolm was a petty criminal. In his autobiography, he describes pimping women, robbing people, and partying as what made up the whole of his life. And had Detroit Red never joined the Nation of Islam, we never would have heard the name Malcolm X. But by joining a movement, by taking history into his own hands, by learning to work with people, by becoming an organizer, Malcolm became somebody capable of changing the world, because the process of changing history, of getting involved in the struggle, also changes you. It teaches you empathy. It teaches you resilience. It teaches you patience and discipline. It transforms you into a person that is capable of fulfilling the role that history has chosen for you. This transformation is not unique to Malcolm X either. Prior to founding the Black Panther Party for self-defense, Huey Newton was a college dropout who made ends meet by shortchanging people. But because Huey was exceptional, and because he got involved in Students for a Democratic Society, we got maybe the most effective working class movement this country had seen in decades. We got the movement that brought us the free breakfast programs, that brought local community organizations, that empowered the Black community to fight for their rights. And think of what the world would have been robbed of if Huey Newton had decided that his interest in revolutionary politics was too weird and wallowed in his misery on the internet. This is another thing that often gets obscured, but Huey P. Newton was a brilliant organizer. He was a brilliant theoretician, but he was not the most charismatic member of the Black Panther Party. That's just a fact. His public speaking was described as awkward and stilted, sometimes overcomplicated. Many felt that some of his political classes were too dense and insular. Huey P. Newton was not normal. And you need to get it out of your head that the only way that you can amount to anything is by desperately trying to be normal. Because oftentimes, the people who change history are obsessed. And they're able to accomplish what they do because they are obsessed. Another perfect example, Vladimir Lenin. Lenin was not a normal person, nor was he described in personal accounts as a very charming or personable person. People who knew him say that he talked with a lisp. They say that he would get so worked up about party disputes and issues that he would stay up for days on end, ranting about them to nobody. That he would work himself up into so much of a panic that he had to play the piano to calm himself down. Fyodor Ilyich Dan, a Menshevik and one of Lenin's enemies, once attacked him in a pamphlet, saying, "What are you going to do with a guy who talks, writes, thinks, and breathes nothing but revolution 24 hours a day?" And this was a common attack of the Social Democrats on the Bolsheviks. They said that they were weird, that they were cultish, and that they gave the whole of their lives to the struggle. And it had not occurred to them, there was no understanding, that the only reason that the Bolsheviks were able to take power, the only reason they were able to change history, to transform Russia from a backwards agrarian society into a superpower, was because they were weird. If you really want to live up to what you have to offer humanity, you have to embrace the person that you are, and you should get involved in the struggle. You need to join an organization. Now, joining an organization is not easy. Being part of a movement is not easy. I'm not going to lie to you. It involves a lot of rejection. It involves dealing with and understanding people, and that can be very difficult. And it involves sometimes facing persecution and being resilient to that persecution, withstanding it. But I think about the person that I was before I joined the Center for Political Innovation, and I am so glad that I joined. You know, my favorite American novel is The Grapes of Wrath. And it's my favorite because of how much I relate to the story of Tom Joad and how much he captures what it means to become an activist. I relate to how at the beginning of the story, Tom is selfish, he's mean-spirited, he's short-sighted, impulsive, he's lazy. But by struggling and suffering, by coming to understand the struggle of oppressed people, through getting involved in a movement, he's transformed into a different person. And by the end of the novel, he is somebody who is capable of sacrificing his own freedom to defend a group of striking workers. And after he's made that sacrifice, he realized he has to run away. And he confronts his mother about why. And the words he says have become a mantra for me. When I've lost or been pushed out of jobs for what I believe. When I've lost partners for what I believe. When life feels hopeless and I start to wonder if my commitment was worth it, I recite these words to myself. He says, "Maybe a fella ain't got a soul of his own, only a little part of a big soul. And then it won't matter. I'll be all around in the dark. Wherever there's a cop beating up a guy, I'll be there. wherever there's a fight so hungry people can eat. I'll be there. I'll be there in the way that guys yell when they're angry, or kids laugh when they're hungry and they know supper's ready. When the people are living in the houses they've built, eating the food that they've grown, I'll be there too. That is what self-improvement means to me. That is what being an activist means to me. And if you are interested in anti-imperialist politics, if you want to take up history's challenge, I invite you to join my organization. It's called the Center for Political Innovation, and there will be a link in the description. Thanks for watching.
I thought that was a tremendous video because getting involved in an organization is a great way to find fulfillment. I've said before, there are two ways to find happiness in this world. One is connecting with other people and loving. The other is building and creating and taking the world around you and improving it. And CPI has the ability to enable you to do both of those things. And ultimately, our goal as an organization is to help you find your ability, your skill in doing all of those things and enable you to do so more effectively. So, you know, I thought that was a tremendous video by Noah. It'll be up on the CPI website shortly. You know, it's already on his YouTube channel. Hope you all subscribe. And it looks like we've got two questions that have come in. So if anyone else wants to send any more questions via Buy Me a Coffee, please do so. I'll put the link in the chat once more. You know, Buy Me a Coffee is a great way to support this community and this YouTube channel and the great work that we do here. I am in the process of publishing my new book, which is very exciting. I plugged the book here on the channel last night. You know, that's very exciting. So that book should be out soon. And I guess I do want to just throw this out there again, right? I said this last night and I will say it again. If anyone has any information on this rally, please send it to me. I can't figure out who is organizing this. March for Justice, March 15th, 2026, Washington, D.C. and across America. I would love to go to this rally, but I want to know more information about it. All I've been able to find is this poster. It looks amazing, right? Take back American sovereignty, hold leaders accountable for treason, up to the people, left and right united. If anyone knows any information, who is behind this, what it's about, please send it to me because this looks very exciting. But as of now, there's not even a rally location. It just says March 15th, you know. So, you know, if anyone knows more about this event, please send it my way. You know, you know, I would just like to know more. And if that event ends up actually happening in Washington, D.C. or in other cities, we would like to probably intervene as CPI because, if you got a question, Buy Me a Coffee /Caleb Maupin, best way to send it. You can also Cash App me, Caleb Maupin 22, or you can Rumble Rant me. But yeah, so the first question was from John McCarthy. He said the War Party still seems to be afraid of Tulsi Gabbard. Yes, but it's more than that. It's more than that. As I talked about, I mean, the Georgia thing, something's going on there. I don't think it's that simple. You know, yes, you are absolutely right that is happening. But there's more to it than that. At this point, I'm looking at Minneapolis, I'm looking at Georgia, I'm looking at the FBI, I'm looking at everything I talked about for the first hour. Yes, John, you are absolutely right. But there is more to it than that. That is what I'm saying at this point. You know, we've known that. I mean, Tulsi Gabbard comes out and says great things. You know, I mean, for somebody who's an active duty U.S. military person, she says great things about war. And I guess as just kind of a review, I will show you the video. I went to her confirmation hearing on Capitol Hill. You know, well, anyway, I'll tell you about it later. There were a lot of people who came for a confirmation hearing, a lot of people who didn't like her. right? You know, and there were a lot of people who went to the confirmation hearing. I mean, it's, you know, hundreds of people. And as she walked in, people started chanting USA, USA, like to applaud her. But then there was a layer of people that were in the gallery with me who didn't like her, and they looked kind of like, yeah, they looked kind of like hippies, kind of. I don't know. That was interesting, and I have to wonder who they are. And so as people were leaving, because there were a lot of people that Code Pink members were there, you know, and others were there to watch her confirmation hearing. I remember I had some of the pamphlets, the CPI pamphlets of Trump and Kim, you know, the New Day for America pamphlet that we printed for the inauguration. And I was handing those to people that were walking out of the hearing. And one of these hippies walked up to me and said, you know, are you a foreign lobbyist? Are you being paid to do this? I said, no, I'm not being paid to do this. And he said, well, who wrote this? I said, I did. And he looked at me like, you know, like, and that was weird. And that was again, I feel like that was the deep state, you know. That was pretty weird, but you know, I'm perfectly within my rights as a citizen to attend a public confirmation hearing and then hand pamphlets to members of the public that are walking out. So I thought that was weird, and that made me feel like, you know, that was the deep state telling me they didn't appreciate me being there and they didn't appreciate Tulsi being there. But who knows? That could have just been one guy having a bad day for all I know. But anyway, this was, you know, right after Trump got into office. He appointed Tulsi Gabbard as his intelligence director, and I went to her confirmation hearing.
Overall, what we saw was the intelligence community quite worried that Tulsi Gabbard might come in and might not agree with their consensus that toppling and destabilizing governments that get in the way of Wall Street monopolies is the best thing to do. Now, one particularly strong moment was when Tulsi Gabbard talked about how outraged she was that the Obama administration had been arming Al-Qaeda and Al-Qaeda-linked groups.
Senator, as someone who enlisted in the military specifically because of Al-Qaeda's terrorist attack on 9/11 and committing myself and my life to doing what I could to defeat these terrorists, it was shocking and a betrayal to me and every person who was killed on 9/11, their families and my brothers and sisters in uniform. When, as a member of Congress, I learned about President Obama's dual programs that he had begun really to overthrow the regime of Syria, all to move forward with their regime change and not acknowledging what was obvious at the time and what has unfortunately borne true, which was that a regime change war in Syria, much like the regime change wars in Iraq, the toppling of Gaddafi and Mubarak, would likely result in the rise of Islamist extremists like Al-Qaeda taking power. Today, we have an Islamist extremist who is now in charge of Syria, as I said, who danced on the streets to celebrate the 9/11 attack, who ruled over Idlib with an Islamist extremist governance, and who has already begun to persecute and kill and arrest religious minorities like Christians in Syria.
I understand.
Why that should be acceptable to anyone is beyond me.
It shouldn't
is
be.
certainly
and
not
I understand,
in our
I appreciate your answer, and thank you. My concern has to do with the tendency to repeat Russian and Syrian, and even in some cases, I think we'll get into in the closed session, Iranian information, and to discount what comes from our intelligence community.
Senator, every American deserves to know that people in our own government were providing support to our sworn enemy, Al-Qaeda. That should not be acceptable by anyone.
Thank you. I couldn't help but smile when they kept going on about who paid for her trip to Syria, how it was a Lebanese American who was connected possibly to a political party in Syria that was connected possibly, and it struck me as how this is how the cancel culture of the so-called left or the synthetic left works. You're connected to so-and-so, you're connected to so-and-so, who's connected to so-and-so, and therefore you're responsible for whatever, right? And the idea that Tulsi Gabbard went to Syria and met with people who are hostile to the United States and tried to hear the other side of the story when it came to the conflict, that was presented as if it was a bad thing. I think that's a pretty good thing that she was able to speak to people in different countries and hear the other side of the story. They were quite fired up about her position on Edward Snowden.
Let me ask you again, Do you believe, as the chairman of this committee believes, as the vast majority of members of our intelligence agencies believe, that Edward Snowden was a traitor to the United States of America?
Senator, if confirmed
This
as
is when the
Director of
rubber hits
National
the road.
Intelligence, I will work with you to make sure that there is not
a
another
moment for
Snowden-like
social
leak.
media. It's not a moment to propagate theories, conspiracy theories. Is Edward Snowden a traitor to the United States of America? That is not a hard question to answer when the stakes are this high.
Senator, as someone who has
Your
served
answer,
in
yes
uniform,
or no, is Edward Snowden a traitor to the United States of America?
as someone who has
I'll go on
worn
to
our
my
uniform
questions.
in combat, I understand how critical our national security
Apparently
is.
you don't. Also, during her opening remarks, she reflected on how she's not a puppet of anyone but God, and how religious bigotry should have no place in American politics. Here's what she said.
Those who oppose my nomination imply that I am loyal to something or someone other than God, my own conscience, and the Constitution of the United States, accusing me of being Trump's puppet, Putin's puppet, Assad's puppet, a guru's puppet, Modi's puppet, not recognizing the absurdity of simultaneously being the puppet of 5 different puppet masters. The same tactic was used against President Trump and failed. The American people elected President Trump with a decisive victory and mandate for change. The fact is, what truly unsettles my political opponents is I refuse to be their puppet. Democrat senators in the past resorted to anti-Christian bigotry against some of President Trump's judicial nominees like Amy Coney Barrett and Brian Boucher. I condemn those actions as a Democrat in Congress at the time, as religious bigotry must be thoroughly condemned by all of us, no matter the religion. Unfortunately, there are some Democrat senators who still don't understand the principle of freedom of religion and Article 6 of the Constitution. Quote, no religious test shall ever be required as a qualification to any office or public trust under the United States. Unfortunately, they're once again using the religious bigotry card, but this time trying to foment religious bigotry against Hindus and Hinduism. If anyone is sincerely interested in knowing more about my own personal spiritual path of Hinduism, I welcome you to go to my account on X, where I'll share more on this topic.
So overall, I'm really glad that I was able to be in the room, and I hope that Tulsi Gabbard does become the Director of National Intelligence, and I do hope that we can accept that there's a new world rising and a new economy in the world, and that it's better for the United States to integrate with this new economy with the BRICS countries than go to war with it and destabilize countries just to keep Wall Street and London at the top of the world. And I hope that Tulsi Gabbard can get into office and do some real change, and that maybe U.S. foreign policy can pivot away from spreading chaos and instability around the world and instead move toward creating peace, building bridges, and carrying out economic development in coordination with different countries. Yeah, no, CPI is pretty awesome. That video there is actually pretty old. That's, we have a much more recent video from our event in New Jersey, which the video is up. The video from that event is up. Great speeches were given by a number of people. We gave out some awards, and it was really a tremendous event. So I guess I'll show the the kind of music. We did some singing at the event with my friend folk singer Paul. So this is just kind of the like overall like summary video of the event. You can watch the speeches. Maybe we'll show them on another night or something. But yeah, and then I'll answer any more questions. So here we go.
The ground on which we stand. Why should we be beggars with our ballot in our hands? God gave the land to the people. First step, sound the blast of freedom, boys, and send it far and wide. March along to victory, for God is on our side. While the voice of nature thunders o'er the rising tide, God gave the land for the people. The land was God who made the land. The land, the ground on which we stand. Why should we be beggars with a ballot in our hand? God gave the land to the people. Heart shout is swelling from the east and from the west. Why should we beg for and let the landlords take the best? Make them pay their taxes or the land must beg the rest. The land was meant for the people. The land was God who gave the land. The land, the ground on which we stand. Why should we be beggars with a ballot in our hand? God gave the land to the people. The banner has been raised on high and face the battle din. The army now is marching on the struggle to begin. We'll never cease our efforts till the victory we win. And the land is free for the people. The land was God who gave the land. The ground on which we stand. Why should we be beggars with a ballot in our hand? God gave the land for the people. Clear the way to liberty, the land must all be free. Winds will not falter and the smart fighting person speaks. Still the flag we love so well shall wave from sea to sea. For the land that is free for the people. The land was God who gave the land. The land, the ground on which we stand. Why should we be beggars with a ballot in our hand? God gave the land to the people. Yeah.
Yep. CPI events are always a lot of fun. So the next question that came in is from David Fox, and he said, are you going to do something special for your 1,000th live stream? That's the next live stream. This is live stream 999, right? So the next one is 1,000. Good question. Very, very good question. I don't know. 1,000 live streams, right? I feel like part of me would like to make the next live stream a fundraiser for the convention this summer because we need to raise money. But that's people don't like fundraisers, but maybe they do. I don't know. It's probably tomorrow night, right? I mean, Saturday's a big night to stream. If I don't stream with Garland tomorrow, which fingers crossed, that might happen, I'll definitely be streaming tomorrow night, and tomorrow night will be the big night. 1,000 live streams. Can you believe it? Can you believe it? How much the world has changed since that first live stream. My goodness. But cheers to those who've been here from the beginning, right? There's a crowd of people that have been here from the beginning. David Fox, he's been here from the beginning. Lynn, right? Right. She's been here from the beginning. Who else has been here from the beginning? There's a few other people that have been here from the beginning. Who else? Kinky, Kinkle, Patricia Leary. She's been here from the beginning. Who else? There's a few other people, right, that have been here from the beginning. Gabby was here about, you got in pretty early on the game, right? You got in pretty early on the game. Gavin's been here from the beginning. Yeah, and that's because I've known Gavin. You know, I think I've known Gavin IRL. So that's, you know, I've known Gavin in real life. So I think that's, yeah. Kinky, Jenny, Gavin, Jenny Lynn, Gavin, right? But you know, 1,000 live streams. We've been through ups and downs. We've been around. There's been nights that there's been over 1,000 people watching on this channel. When we first started, we were lucky to get 20 people watching. I think there were the first couple streams would be like 25, 30 people watching, and I'd be like, wow, this is amazing. And you know, and I mean, we've been through all kinds of different stuff, and it's good, right? But the main thing was, I will say this: if you watch even stream number 1, right? I never intended for this to be social media entertainment. I always wanted to build an activist group. I am very thankful that I'm as old as I am, in a way, because I got involved in activism in real life. And that's kind of what Noah talked about in his video. Activism changes you. I would not be as healthy as I am or as successful as I am, right? You know, I mean, I'm not a millionaire, but you know, I have a good job, and I've traveled the world. I've met multiple presidents. I'm on international television. I've written a number of books, including books that have caused national scandals and stuff. You know, I'm doing all right. I would never have had that success if I hadn't gotten involved in a movement, right? If I had just viewed this as a podcast, but there were no podcasts, right? The internet was very new. And for me, I got interested in this kind of politics, and I went and found a movement to join. And that was transformative for me. And I have gotten where I've gotten, and I've very much improved as a person, in terms of social skills and interacting with people, in terms of learning to explain ideas, and in terms of adjusting and understanding the world. You know, I've learned so much. You know, my understanding was very, very, very low when I first got involved in this stuff. And, you know, I think of all that I've learned, and, you know, the world has changed a lot. And, you know, I think about all of that, and, you know, I mean, it's from being involved in a movement. It's not through listening to podcasts, you know? So, you know, that's what this has always been. And I've always understood that this channel wouldn't explode in popularity. It wouldn't become the biggest YouTube channel ever because of its activist orientation. You know, that there are some things you can only learn through the struggle. So I mean, this channel exists to get you to join CPI, you know, and it's true. You know, I think about the people on this channel who become members. You know, people like David Fox, who was at our convention. He's out there in Australia. People like Noah, people like Penny, people like Gabby, people like John in Chicago. He's been here for quite some time. And I think about those people, and it's like one of those people who gets involved online and then becomes a member of the organization and becomes active. One of those people is worth 1 million likes, 1 million shares. I mean, you know what I mean? And it's true. And I have come to the conclusion that this channel needs to be aimed at finding those people, finding the Gabbies, finding the Davids, finding the Pennies, finding the Noahs, finding the John McCarthys. This channel is not aimed at clickbait. You know, for a long time, I would say hit the like button, hit the subscribe button. I don't say that anymore because I want to get out of the mindset that I'm chasing that. I'm not chasing that, right? I'm not. I am looking for the small number of people who will make this their lifestyle. Ellie, right? She's been here for quite some time, right? Ellie in Chicago. She's been here from the beginning, I think. Trying to remember, there's a few other people, you know, there's a few other names that stand out, right? And you know, I want this channel to be about finding the people who will make this their life and make this their community. And part of that is that they go beyond this channel. Look, if all this is for you is a form of internet entertainment, as much as you might not believe me now, you'll eventually change the channel, right? If this is just a TV show for you, eventually you're going to watch another TV show. But the idea is that if you like the ideas here, you join, and then you don't just watch me as a TV show, you make friends with other people, and you get involved in carrying out operations, right? You're involved in putting on events. You're involved in campaigns and outreach that we do. You're involved in our efforts. You get involved. I mean, we've done a lot in terms of the Uhuru movement. We've done a lot in terms of Peace MAGA. We've done a lot in terms of, Dan in LA was just out there for Falun Gong. We had rallies for Maduro. Hours after Maduro was kidnapped, CPI was in the streets in multiple cities, right? And the idea is that you learn these ideas here, but then you put them into practice, right? And you get involved in the struggle, right? And you meet other people, not just me, and you learn the joy of carrying out operations and trying to achieve victory. And that's what this channel exists to do. This is an activist channel. It has always been an activist channel. Always has been. And I want it to be nothing less. And I am far more interested in finding 5 or 6 more activists, 20, 30 more activists than I am in finding 100,000 more likes and shares. And that's because I understand what's actually going to change the world. The world is not changed by people passively watching this channel. The world is changed by people doing what Dan has done, doing what Gabby has done, and getting involved. That's what's actually going to change the world. And it's very rewarding. And that's really what Noah's video is all about, is about how rewarding it is. And I've learned that. My life is an example of that. As mad as I get at the communist groups, thank goodness they were there, because if they hadn't been there, I would not be the person I am today, right? So, illiberalism, right, is the future. And, illiberal movements are good for people to join. So Kim bought 3 coffees. And she said, for security reasons, I don't think anyone should attend the rally until it is clear who called it. Very strange. Wanted to ask for a while for you to please comment on the role of the police. Since they are needed in any society, they have served me well when I've needed them. Okay, so that's 2 questions. First of all, yeah, you're right, Kim. I mean, we have to find out who's organizing the rally. We can't just show up, especially if there's no location on there. We don't even know. DC. Oh, we're just going to show up in a city. There's not even a location on there. So it's a little strange. This leaflet's floating around the internet and no one knows what it is. There's no website. There's no locations. There's no organization. So yeah, until we know what's what, we can't really do it. That's the first thing. Your question. I agree with you. And that's why I keep asking, right? And I think David sent me some stuff about who first tweeted it or something, but we just need more information. And I've done some investigation. I've called people and other people haven't heard. So I want this to be a real rally that is good, but I just need to, find out more information. You were 100% correct, Kim. And thank you for being concerned about my security. Security is important. Security is very important. That's all I'll say about that. And then the second question is, wanted to ask for a while for you to please comment on the role of the police. Since they are needed in any society, they seem to have served me well. Well, look, I have come a long way on this. Part of being a leftist is you hate cops. And even growing up, I had resentment against police because I saw police as bullies, and police can be bullies. A lot of people have had negative interactions with the police. Obviously, people of color, it's a much more extreme, reality. But, even growing up, even before I was political, I had some negative experiences, negative interactions with police, especially before Black Lives Matter, before, that issue became mainstream, communists, that was one of the things they talked about that no one else talked about, was the issue of police brutality, plus protests, cops beating up protesters. I will say this, and this is just, there's so much more protesting going on nowadays that cops are a lot nicer to protesters. There used to be, when I first got political in the Iraq War days, and maybe it's because I'm in New York City and not the Midwest. It might still be like this in the Midwest, but I didn't even see this in Minnesota. And that's the heartland of America. I didn't see this, but there used to be this attitude coming out of the 60s that protesters were bad people, not because of what they were protesting around, but because they were protesting. Like, if you protest stuff, you're disrespecting America or something. And it used to be only leftists protested, right? The Tea Party was a really big deal when the Tea Party started, because that was Republicans protesting. And there would be anti-abortion demonstrations. That existed. You'd see people outside of abortion clinics or just along the side of the road with the fetus placard. But other than, like, people with fetus placards, you generally didn't see conservative protesters. And people immediately thought of hippies. And there was this memo. I grew up hearing this, right? It was just part of it. It really started with the Gulf War more than anything. From what I understand, it started in 1991. But I grew up in the 90s just constantly hearing that during the Vietnam War, there were these hippies who protested the Vietnam War, and they spit on our troops and they disrespected America. And that's why you should never protest anything ever again. You should never protest a war, especially because these hippies were just so bad. And that was like what a lot of people believed, including Democrats, mind you. It wasn't just Republicans. A lot of, like, Bill Clinton Democrats believed this. And it was just this kind of thing that unless you were a leftist, unless you were like a communist or somebody who'd been involved in protests, unless you were somebody who was like tied to the left in some way, that's what you believed, right? If you were white, I guess, right? In the black community, things are a little bit different because of the civil rights movement, because of black nationalism. But there was just this attitude that protesting was wrong. Protesting meant you were crazy. Protesting was illegal. You'd immediately get arrested, which is not the case. And that people who protest are dangerous or something like that. And it was very common that any protest, the police would come and be assholes to it. They would immediately come and it would be political. They would be politically assholes to you. They would be like, they'd show up, why do you hate America? You better stay on the sidewalk. I can arrest one of you, and you'd get police that were like conservative kind of, that would come up to you and kind of bully you for protesting, because there was this attitude among the wider population that protesting was wrong. And that's how it was when I first got political. When I was like 18, 19, it was kind of like that. It was like there was this attitude that protesting was not something that good people did. It was something only leftists did. Conservatives never did it. And if you did it, you were bad. And so based on that, cops were a lot nastier to protesters, right? They were a lot meaner to protesters. It's not like now protests are so common, right? Especially since Trump's been in office, and even before that with with Ferguson and Baltimore and Black Lives Matter. It's different now. Police handling protesters is just part of the job for police officers. They do violate protesters' rights, don't get me wrong. But even during Occupy Wall Street in New York City, which is very liberal, there was still kind of this attitude that, like, people who protest, the cops had this attitude, you're a bad person for protesting. I'd like to beat the crap out of you if I could. And any excuse I have to arrest you, I'm going to, because you're a bad person because you're protesting. That's not there anymore. So, but based on that, right? Based on the fact that communist groups were talking about police brutality, based on the facts that cops would see you protesting and be mean to you because you were protesting, there was this resentment that developed. And I look back on it now, and some of it was, look, cops do bad things, and cops do bad things to protesters, and cops do bad things to, random people, especially people of color. So, and then when I worked around police brutality in Cleveland, I worked in some cases where I saw police just being monsters. I worked around the Whitby case. You can look up Rebecca Whitby. I think you can probably find old articles about that case and the way the police acted in that case in the courtroom, right? I was in the courtroom where the officers that were accusing this young black woman, the way they conducted themselves. And, there are some things about police culture that are indefensible, right? I mean, one thing is that, when there's a wrongful death, right? When a police officer kills somebody, um, like there was a case in New York City, the case of Ramarley Graham. And he was a young man who the police wanted to stop and frisk him and search him. And he ran home. He ran away from them. So they followed him home and they came into the apartment and shot him. They killed him, right? And he didn't have a gun or anything. And, he had weed on him. He had a couple joints in his pocket. So when they were going to search him, he was afraid, oh, they'll find the weed on me. I'll go to jail. So he ran away from them. They were angry that he defied him. He defied them by running away. And so they shot him in his apartment. And I believe that the cops were charged for doing that, which, because of the atmosphere of Black Lives Matter and everything, the police were actually charged. But when the police officers shot, they shot this unarmed young man at their court hearings. Every cop in New York City, that's New York City cops, that's like 10,000 people. That's a huge exaggeration. But every cop in the world came to their sentencing to stand with them. And it's like, what other job in the world, if you're a lawyer and you kill somebody, are all the lawyers going to come and stand there and be like, I support you? No. Right. If you're a bricklayer and you kill somebody, all the bricklayers come to your court hearings and be like, I support you. But when they sentenced or had hearings for these guys, this officer that killed this guy, just murdered him, they all piled in to support him and they applauded. He's a hero. He's our brother. Excuse me. And that there were times, again, now police brutality is widely discussed. Now all kinds of people talk about it, but it used to be that only communists talked about it. Communists, the black community talked about it. But among white people, communists talked about it. Maybe activist-oriented people talked about it, but that was it. And that I would, especially when I was in college, I went to a college that was very, very white in the suburbs of Cleveland. And I would often meet people that were in a police officer family. They had an uncle who was a cop. They had a parent who was a cop. They were trying to be a cop in the college criminal justice program. And these people lived in an alternate reality. When they talk about the thin blue line or something, they would believe that in their minds, there was no such thing as police brutality. It was all made up, right? All the videos were faked. There had never been any police brutality. And the cops are the victims of the criminals. And police brutality was made up by criminals in order to get away with their crimes or something like that. Racism wasn't real. They lived in this alternate reality where, the world was out to get the cops, basically. And it was scary talking to them. It was kind of frightening talking to them because there just couldn't be any problem with police brutality. And again, I worked in cases in Cleveland where I saw, there was one case. I don't even want to relive. There were some bad things I observed in Cleveland at the Cleveland Justice Center. Let me say that in courtrooms, I saw them retaliate against witnesses and things like that. There was a case. I don't even want to. I saw them acting in ways that are really indefensible within the courthouse. There were things that anyway, I just don't want to go there. So there's all of that, but then there's also every police officer can't be held accountable for that. Right. And whenever you're dehumanizing somebody, whenever you're, you're saying that because somebody does a certain job, they're a bad person. And kind of like what Kim said in her question, there's going to be police in any society. You know, I'd like to eventually get to a world, in some far future where we don't have to have laws, but that's very far off, and, I don't know. It's just the way the hate that we had for police officers, the chip we had on our shoulder, it didn't help, right? And that's just not the way I want to deal with anybody now. And I don't buy into the idea that every person who's a police officer is bad. I don't buy into this. I mean, there is this way that regular leftists handle that issue, right? Of all cops are the enemy. I don't think that. I don't think that anymore. I just don't. And I honestly regret some of my behavior as a protester, to be honest. I've changed a lot over the years, and I think about, some of the things I said over the years to police officers and stuff. And I look back on that and I thought, well, why did you do that? It's just, again, my critique of leftism is that leftism is libidinal. It's libidinal and Oedipal. It's pent up anger, pent up rage, and it's about letting it out on people. And honestly, that's just not, you can't build a healthy political movement on the basis of that. And I learned that the hard way because I tried. I mean, I was in a movement that was like that, and I was full of rage as a young man. And so I'm not condemning anybody, and I'm just as guilty of it. But I look back on that, the rage that we had for police officers, that I particularly had against police officers, just the hatred, just these are evil, awful human beings. No, we need to get beyond that. Right? You can't do good things if that's your attitude. You can't do good in this world if you're approaching things from a place of rage and dehumanization. As much as justified as that rage may be, as unfair as the world may have been to you, if you approach things with that perspective, you're not going to get anything good. And sometimes you just have to learn that yourself, right? I'm sure there's somebody watching this right now who hears me saying this and thinks, well, Caleb, how dare you? I've been through blank, 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 which you have. I'm sure. I don't question that. I've been through blank, blank, blank. This has happened to me. I'm full of rage. How dare you try to silence my rage? I'm not trying to silence your rage. I'm not. And I was where you are too. And I work hard every day to not be full of rage, to not be angry, and to not view the world in that kind of resentful way. Right. But I had to get to the point where I didn't want to be that way anymore. And it's still, it's difficult, right? If you've thought that way for a long time, and if you joined a political movement that is, very much about stoking those feelings, it can be very difficult to not think that way. So I'm not here to judge anybody, but that includes police officers, and police do good things too, right? Police, prevent people from committing suicide. Police, they arrest child molesters that are harming people. Police, when there's a car accident, they're there to help the victims, and again, we don't think about any of that. In our interactions, all police did was, beat up black people and arrest protesters. And that's not actually true. And that there are many people that become police officers for good reasons. Now, there are people who become police officers for bad reasons. Yes. A lot of them that, they want to be bullies, they want to have power over other people, but not all of them, right? There's people who just want to serve the community, people who actually want to be, they believe, those cop shows on TV, and they want to be the good guy on those shows, right? I will say one thing I can't stand is what people talk about the cop shows are propaganda, right? Those TV shows. My wife watches those shows. I don't know how she can watch them because they're just so contrary to reality. And even when I was a teenager, my parents would be watching those shows, and often I just couldn't be in the room because we'd have arguments, right? And I remember arguing with my parents. They'd say, sometimes people do commit crimes, Caleb. The criminal isn't always right. And I always would watch those shows and get angry. I'd be happy when the criminal got off on an acquittal. And I just had this oppositional thing, and my parents couldn't stand it, and those cop shows are ridiculous. I mean, the criminal always gets off on a technicality, right? And if only the cop was able to, those shows have nothing to do with the legal system. Anyone who's actually been in the legal system, that's just not how it works, right? The overwhelming majority of cases in America never go to trial. And if they do go to trial, the conviction rate at trial is astronomical. If anyone ever goes on trial in the United States, there's a very, very high chance they're innocent. Why would they go through that? There are a couple other reasons, right? But, like 99% of cases don't go to trial. So if someone is actually going through the process of going on trial for the crime they're accused of, they're probably innocent. Because why would they spend all that money and put themselves through 2 years of not being able to hold a job because they have to go to court? There are some reasons. One, if the person's very wealthy people, right? Which occasionally, yes, wealthy people do get charged with crimes. They'll go on trial because they're wealthy, right? So there's that. The other thing is in California, I don't think they have it anymore. They used to have in California this thing called the 3 strikes law, that if you were convicted of a felony, your third felony, no matter what it was, you got 25 years in prison, no matter what it was. So if it's your third strike, you would automatically go to trial because you don't want to go to prison for 25 years. So if there's any way you can get out of that, you would do that. So there's a couple, areas where a person might go to trial if they weren't innocent. But if someone actually goes to trial, the overwhelming chances are that they're innocent, because why would they do that? And so then the fact that the conviction rate is so high, that is ridiculous. And I guess the annoying thing about the American legal system is that everyone thinks it's so amazing, and it's not. Right? Everyone has it in their head, oh, we have this amazing legal system, shadow of a doubt and all this. No, we don't. And actually, it's worse in a way because, very rarely does the person who's accused of the crime get acquitted. Most of the time, they take a plea deal just to get it over with, right? They take a plea deal. They admit to something lesser, right? This is how messed up our legal system is. So if you're charged with a crime, to prevent having to have a trial for you, they then will offer you to plead guilty to something less in exchange for not having a trial, right? So basically, if the police charge you with murder and you didn't do it, right? They're going to say to you, all right, well, we'll say it was manslaughter, which is like, that's when you kill someone accidentally. And you'll plead guilty to manslaughter, and we'll be done with the whole thing. And it's like, you didn't kill anybody, but you don't want to risk going to trial because your chances of being acquitted are slim to none. And so they put you in jail for, irresponsibly hitting him with your car or something. Like it doesn't even make sense, right? It's not right? Either they murdered the person or they didn't. But it's like, we're going to negotiate that you didn't murder the guy, that you third-degree manslaughtered him. And it's like, well, no, either I murdered the guy or I didn't. I didn't third-degree manslaughter him. So we're going to change what I did in order to... It's all messed up. It's completely messed up. It has nothing to do with justice, right? And that's the American legal system. So then if you don't go along with that, if you don't play the game with them and confess to something way lower than... If you don't do that, and you actually go to trial, the chances of you actually getting acquitted at trial are slim to none. And it's like, well, if that's, and then why would anyone go to trial if they weren't innocent, right? Why, so there's many, many layers to how messed up the American legal system is. That's not every individual cop on the street's fault, right? That's not their fault, right? It's, the guy, writing parking tickets, that's not his fault. A parole officer whose job it is to help integrate people out of prison into society, is that his fault? No. Is that the state highway patrolman's fault? No. But there's other things. Police perjury, right? Alan Dershowitz is an Epstein associate, a Zionist, awful guy in a lot of ways, but he's considered an expert on the American legal system. And he says police perjury is reality. And anyone who's dealt with the legal system, will tell you police perjury is, they lie. And it's like, it's tolerated, it's an expected and the reason they get away with lying, it's like almost their job to lie on the stand, is because of the fact that they lie to help the prosecutor, and it would be the prosecutor that would charge them with perjury. So they're lying to do a favor for the prosecutor, who's their boss. And so, is he going to then charge them for lying? Of course not. So cops lying on the stand is just part of, so I don't know. There's a lot of messed up things related to the police, is what I'm telling you, Kim. But I also have gotten over hating individuals. I regret how hateful I was in the past. And I think the problems are more systemic than individual. And I don't think venting your rage on individuals helps anything. And I also think that there are cops who do good things, like arrest child molesters or drug dealers, like rescue people in car accidents, help mentally ill people. There are police officers that do good things every day that no one talks about, and that the kind of the standard leftist fixation on like, I hate cops, that's not healthy. It's not healthy. And I was one of those people, as an Occupy Wall Street protester, as someone who went to court with police brutality victims in Cleveland. I was definitely one of those people, and I regret that now. I really do. I regret it. Because it's just not productive, right? If you just, it's like, so it's a long drawn out way of saying that. And I will also say that, again, like I said at the beginning of this long drawn out answer I just gave you, Kim, things have changed. It used to be that cops very much had like resentment against protesters, and now protests are so common, especially if you live in a major city. That's not the case. Look, I remember I had an argument with people in high school. Do you remember Fred Phelps? People remember Reverend Fred Phelps. He was the pastor of Westboro Baptist Church in Kansas. And he became famous because he would protest the funerals of gay people with signs that said, God hates fags, right? He protested. There was a gay man who was murdered in Colorado, Matthew Shepard. He protested his funeral. Matthew Shepard is in hell. And he was this pastor from Kansas who like made a career offending people by protesting funerals. Okay. And I remember having an argument with people that I knew in high school who insisted that guy was a quote hippie. I said, he's not a hippie. He's a conservative Christian pastor from Kansas. He's not a hippie. He's a right-wing conservative. And they said, but he's protesting. He must be a hippie. Right. And I said, what do you mean he's a hippie? Like, I remember having this argument that they assumed because he was protesting, he must be a hippie. Another thing is that I remember in Cleveland years ago, I was protesting because they were closing down the Huron Road Trauma Center. And that was a huge barrier to healthcare access on the east side of Cleveland. The Huron Road Trauma Center, if you got shot in the head in Cleveland, you needed to get to a trauma center immediately or you were going to be dead on arrival. And they closed it down. And that was like, the lack of access, the Black community, basically, they couldn't get to a hospital soon enough. And so we were at the Huron Road Trauma Center with some of the Black nationalist groups, and we're protesting Save Huron Road Trauma Center, right? That this was a threat to, public health. You need to have a a healthcare clinic that if somebody has a serious blow to the head, they don't die. And so we're protesting to save the Huron Road Trauma Center. And this woman who worked at the Huron Road Trauma Center, right? I remember her being really nasty and rude, and just like cussing us out. And I think she didn't understand we were trying to save her job. She was upset that the Huron Road Trauma Center was closing down. And I think she didn't understand that we were protesting against the Huron Road Trauma Center. It was like, she was like, you're a protester. That means you're a bad person. You're disrespecting America. You're disrespecting our country. You're rude. You're disrespectful. And like, she couldn't understand. No, we're protesting because you're losing your job and they're closing your job down. And we're saying it should be kept. And it's like, she couldn't understand that. No, protester is bad, right? I don't see that anymore. That's kind of that's not part of the public mindset anymore. Another thing is, the first communist group I was around was a group of Maoists, a group of Maoist communists. And, I almost hesitate to say this because I don't want anyone to think that I would ever try to justify police brutality against them. That's not what I'm doing. Unfortunately, though, they had this way of being where, like, anytime a police officer, I told you there was this thing where police were rude to protesters. Anytime a protester, anytime they were, a cop was being rude to them, they would try to escalate it as dramatically as they possibly could. Okay. That's not a good thing to do. And I don't know why they did that. It was just this way of being. And I've noticed that was part of that. That's something I noticed about a lot of boomer leftists, right? In my interactions with cops, like, I mean, there were times I was rude at protests and stuff, no question about it. But if a police officer was like, stopping you, my approach was to be very, 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 polite and all of that, because you don't want to make him angry. But a lot of the boomer leftists I knew would get very rude very quickly with police. And I would always wonder, like, what are you doing? Like, this is dangerous. And there were many times I was with those Maoists, the Maoist group I was around in particular, that was just part of the way they were. I just remember there were many times we had a literature table set up and the cop said, you can't be here. You're blocking that. What do you mean? You talking to me like that? And they would just provoke. It would become a shouting match. It would become, and I was like, guys, like, but it was like their approach was to just get heated with the police. And, there were a number of them that did have criminal records because things had gotten intense, but, they didn't deserve it. Right. Again, just like Alex Preddy didn't deserve to die for, having a gun on his holster and spitting on the, that doesn't justify any of the repression this group has endured, which they have endured repression over the years. Their members have gotten beaten up and arrested just for selling their newspaper and stuff. But they had this way of being that was very much, anytime we get confronted by law enforcement, we make a scene, we start yelling, we insult them, I was not comfortable with that. And I was in the Workers' World Party for 8 years. They weren't like that necessarily, but there were times, I remember one time we were in Harlem and we had a sound truck and a cop pulled us over and told us you needed a permit for a sound truck. And the woman driving was just so, I was like, what in the world? Like, she was just so rude to the police officer. And I was afraid we might get arrested, right? Because technically, right, if you have a sound truck and you don't have a permit, they're just going to say turn it off generally. But then when he pulled her over, she just started antagonizing him and being rude. And I was like, I'm afraid they're going to arrest us all. I'm afraid they're going to take us out of the cars and take us to jail. Will you shut up? you know, and I'm white and this woman was not. And I'm like, you're a woman of color here, and you're just, but maybe it's because of experiences. I don't know, but I was like afraid. And I was like, my goodness, like they've already pulled us over, right? Let's just try to, they've pulled us over. They don't like that we have the sound truck. Okay. My approach was, I wasn't driving, but if I would have said, oh, I didn't know. I'm so sorry, officer. We'll take it down right now. And I mean, who knows, but, and maybe drive, to another part of the city and do it over there, But the approach of the woman I was in the car with was like very heated with these two cops. And I was like, what in the world are we, so I don't know. These things are very, very, it's all very different, right? There are different ways of dealing with this. So there's many, many ways to come at this. And I am at the point where I don't hate police officers. I just don't, I don't. And I regret the fact that I did hate police officers because I just feel like nothing good comes from hate. That said, the culture has changed a lot. The way police interact with protesters has changed a lot, but there's a huge amount of evil, awful things associated with cops. I can't unsee a lot of what I saw. And like I said, about lying on the witness stand, about the way they cheer for cops who kill people, innocent people, and the way they the thin blue line where they think police brutality isn't real, it's all made up. And it's not just that. The people that were into that had cops in their family, they'd always say that all the prisoners have PlayStations in their cells. That's one of the craziest things. They say, oh, all the jails are full of like, PlayStations and massage parlors, and the jails are just these really nice places. And I'd be like, I don't think that's the case. But these cops believe it, right? That all the criminals, they go to jail and they get to play PlayStation the whole time. And it's just like, that's not true, but these cops believe the jails are like amazing, luxury hotels that prisoners get to go to, and they're not. And I don't know how they believe that, but it's part of the like thin blue line. I don't know. Anyway, I've spent a long time answering this question, Kim, and I hope I gave you a sufficient answer. And maybe my answer was a bit inconclusive. Maybe it was a bit inconclusive. I don't know, but yeah, generally I have moved away from the standard leftist position on law enforcement because it's just not helpful, but there's still a lot of bad stuff there. Is that fair? I think that's a fair way of answering that question. So, all right. Are there any other questions, folks? Any other questions? Speak now or forever hold your peace. Speak now or forever hold your peace. Anybody else? Anybody? Going once, going twice. Anybody got any last questions for me? I'll put on. I swear I had some music I was going to put on a stream and I never got to play it. So let me see if I've got that music. I don't remember what it was, but I had some music I was going to put on, and I don't know where it went. But I mean, I can put on some here. We'll put on the Ballad of Joe Stalin. Why not? All right. So before I put on the Ballad of Joe Stalin, right? Quick reminder: if you have a question, Buy Me a Coffee is the best way to send your question. I also do Rumble rants. I don't see any Rumble rants as of now. I also can do Cash Apps. If you got a question, now is your last chance. So send your question if you got it. We'll put on the Ballad of Joe Stalin. If there's any more questions after that, I'll answer them. And if not, then we'll call it a night. So here's the Ballad of Joe Stalin, the original version, Ewan McCool's classic song.
Oh, Stalin was a mighty man, and a mighty man was he. He led the Soviet people on the road to victory. All through the revolution, he fought at Lenin's side, and they made a combination till the day that Lenin died. He said, come on, you people, we must work with brain and hand. And then one day the Nazis came into the Soviet land. They plundered to the Volga, to Stalingrad. And then Joe Stalin said, come on, me boys, and kicked them out again. Oh, Stalin was a southerner, in Georgia he was born, where the oranges grow thick and fast and fields of waving corn. And Stalin is a farmer, his fingers they are green, and he has planted the biggest crop the world has ever seen. One day he looked upon the map and frowned and shook his head. There's too much brown and not enough green, these were the words he said. We'll have to change the weather, boys, he said, and then he smiled. So let's begin by planting trees along 3,000 miles. So Stalin rolled his sleeves up then and said it's time to start. The Volga River and the Don, they are too far apart. I think we'd better join them, so come and help me, pal, and we'll build a mighty waterway, the Volga-Don Canal. Then Stalin went into the north, and there saw rivers three, all emptying their waters into the polar sea. Now that's not right, Joe Stalin said, these rivers, they are ours. We'll turn them round and make them work and make electric power. There was a range of mountains that were standing in the way, so Stalin put his hand out and smoothed them all away. For Joe, he is determined to make the land all green, and that's the biggest project that the world has ever seen. Oh, Stalin is a mighty man, and he has a mighty plan. He's harnessed nature to the plow to work for the good of man. He's hammered out the future, the forgeman he has been, and he's made the worker state the best the world has ever seen.
All righty. Well, I guess there aren't any more questions, and it is well after midnight here in New York, so I'm going to put on the closing music. I guess tomorrow night, either I'll stream with Garland or I will do the 1000th stream. So keep your eyes out for that. Either way, tomorrow night it'll be good because Garland is always good, and 1000 streams is also pretty good. So yeah, thanks everybody. Catch you next time.
Upsurge in the struggle against U.S. imperialism is now emerging throughout the world. Ever since World War II, U.S. imperialism and its followers have been continuously launching wars of aggression. But the people of various countries have been continuously waging revolutionary wars to defeat their aggression. And while the danger of a new world war still exists, and the people of all countries must get prepared, revolution is the main trend in the world today.